So now for this evening's talk, I'm delighted to welcome Reem Haddad from the International College, who is going to talk about the history of this eminent institution, which started in Smyrna and then moved to Beirut. So Reem, her past career has been as a journalist, and she's deployed that experience and skills in discovering the story, unearthing the interesting history about International College, or IC as it's called in short. She graduated in the United States. It's now based in Beirut as a writer for International College. And I think without further ado, I'm going to pass to you, Reem, to tell us all about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Quentin. Well, I thought before I actually start the presentation, I would tell you why I wrote the book. Actually, I never actually set out to write a book. It just kind of happened accidentally. I hired to write the newsletter, and part of the job was to interview former teachers. So I was interviewing this history teacher. He was 96, and he kept referring to some boxes. You've got to find those boxes. You've got to find my boxes. I said, what boxes? He said in 1970, he found all the documents that came from Smyrna to Beirut. He put them in boxes, 20 or 25 boxes, and they have disappeared. It's been 50 years. Of course, they've disappeared. There's been a civil war. IC has been everywhere. He said, no, you've got to find my boxes. I promised I would. I looked everywhere for the boxes. There were no boxes. Then one day I remembered that we have an off-campus building, and this is for the foreign teachers. And there's a basement down there. So I went there. So happens that the order has been placed to, everything was going in garbage trucks, everything, it was being vacated. So I jumped on the garbage truck and I found 2 or 3 boxes, not 25, but 2 or 3 boxes. I opened them, there they were, documents and pictures, 100 years old, coming from Smyrna. I mean, obviously there were mice droppings, insects, water leakage. So I took them to my office, saved what I could save, scanned what I could scan. And I thought, great, I have an archive now for the school. Then one day I heard that our founder, he's called Alexander McLaughlin, the last grandson was alive in Connecticut. So I thought, okay, and he was 94. So I said, I better go and interview him. So I went to Connecticut. I actually invited myself to his home. And we sat for 3 days, and he told me all I need to know about, not all I need to know, but a lot about Smyrna. But then he told me there's a diary that he saw his grandfather, Alexander McLaughlin, nail the cover down, and there are only a handful. Go find it, back to Beirut. And I went to the American University of Beirut archives, and there it was. Nobody had ever touched it before. So I had now a wonderful diary, and I had all these documents there. So I said, okay, I'm onto something. And I started digging more and researching. And it was a great story, but it stopped in the middle because there was no reason. I couldn't find a reason why IC moved from Smyrna to Beirut. It was a great campus, great teachers, amazing everything. Curriculum was amazing. They were giving college level classes. Why would they move? Plus the other schools that were also founded by the board of Boston back then, the Protestant missionaries, they didn't move. Why only IC came to Beirut? And the campus is amazing. I've been there. It's the most beautiful campus ever. Why would they leave that? Well, I kept digging and digging, and I couldn't find an answer. And then one day, and after that, it's like a thread, a thing that just unraveled. So then I followed the thread. Beirut went Arab nationalism, 16-year civil war, and the whole story just sort of unfolded in front of me. Now I had all this information. What do I do with all this information? So I wrote it down. And that's how IMIC came to be born. That's the book I wrote, accidentally, really. So, but I have to tell you, there's a lot of characters, a lot of jumping around. So I wanted to make this presentation simple. So I took things, but please bear with me because I'll be jumping a little bit around from country to country. So I'm going to start the presentation now. Just share the screen. And then just can you see the screen? Do I have it?
That's good.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. All right. So the story starts in Beirut in 1872. Just a second, I have to fix a few things here. All right. All right. So can you still see the screen? Because I think I'm pressing something here. All right. So it was called the Syrian Protestant College, SPC. It was founded by Dr. Daniel Bliss and by the Board of Missionaries in Boston. And today this is known as the American University of Beirut, AUB. The idea behind SPC was to establish a school for higher learning and medical training. So in 1866, it opened. But then there was a problem because by 1870, there were not enough students to enroll. They had to be sufficiently educated. So they decided in 1872 to start a prep school. And this way, they'll always have a steady flow of highly educated students. And it was called just that, the prep school. But I want to show you, if I can just show you here. Can you see the pointer here? This is the prep school. And this area all the way down to the sea, this is what will ultimately eventually be IC. Okay, and right behind this building is where I'm sitting. So I'm telling you this story of IC. Okay. Now I take you to Tarsus. So you've got two ministers, Alexander McLaughlin, and he's Canadian, and you've got Hatun Jenanyan, he's Armenian. Now they were assigned to go to Tarsus in Turkey to open a boys' school. They did. It was called St. Paul's Institute, and it did very well. The first 2 years was amazing, but the problem was that these two men had an argument. They did not agree. First, about the allocation of funds, and secondly, about the curriculum. Alexander McLaughlin wanted a more liberal curriculum, and Jenania wanted a much more religious and biblical curriculum. So finally, McLaughlin just resigned. Now, meanwhile, in Smyrna, what was happening there? In Smyrna, the board had opened the American Collegiate Institute, ACI, in 1878. This was a boarding school for girls, and it was doing really well. So a year later, they opened the American School for Boys, but it did not do well at all. And yet other Christian sects, such as the Jesuits and the Greeks, they opened school for boys, and these schools were doing really well. They were flourishing. So the missionaries in Smyrna contacted the board in Boston and told them about the situation and said, we desperate need for a school for boys, a Protestant school for boys in this region, and we need money to do this. So in Boston, the board met, they agreed, and they allocated $1,000 for this project. Now the question is, who was qualified to do this job? I take you back to Tarsus. Here, Alexander McLaughlin was planning to just give up and go back to Canada when he was offered the job to go to Smyrna and establish a school for boys. He went to Smyrna because he needed to see what kind of city this is first. And he found it to be thriving. It had quite a bit of Christian population. There were Greeks, Armenians, Europeans, and Americans. It was perfect for a school. So while there, he met and married Rose Blackler, and she is the daughter of an American businessman who had moved to the area some while ago. Okay, so together, they moved into the American Boys School, which was already existing, but it was in really bad shape. And they renovated the whole building. And it was an ideal location in the Basmahan district near the railway. I'm going to show you. This is it. This is the first campus of IC. And it was really, this campus was the campus that was lost in the fire, not the second campus. This campus was lost. But meanwhile, the board still had not paid the $1,000, but Alexander went ahead. They bought textbooks, school desks, maps, everything on credit. But just on a side note, they never received the $1,000. It was $500. Still, by October 1891, the American Boys School was ready for its first students. And here they are. So October 15, 1891, the school opened with 35 students. Almost all were Armenians. Why was that? The Greeks had their own schools. They were not going to send their kids to a Protestant school. The Turks, there was a law back then that forbade Turkish students from attending foreign schools, so they could not go. So the Armenians were the sole source of students for the first 2 years. Just a year later, in 1892, the name was changed to the American High School for Boys, and it started finally attracting Greek students. Now, since the promised $1,000 never arrived, Alexander was more or less on his own to finance the school. Now, even though the school was attracting lots of students, it needs money. And as luck would have it, in 1893, John Stuart Kennedy and his wife Emma were on a ship going to Constantinople, and they stopped at Smyrna. It was only meant for a few hours, but there was some kind of problem with the ship, so they had to stay overnight. And Alexander came to meet them and offered them, why don't you stay at IC? And Kennedy said, no, we want to stay in one of these hotels, but they could not find any rooms for them. So finally, they did stay at IC. And this was the best thing that ever happened to IC, because the Kennedys fell in love with the school and actually became its most loyal supporters for many years to come. In fact, if it were not for the Kennedys, IC may not exist today. So then you have, the school was becoming bigger and bigger. And again, Alexander changed the name to the American Collegiate Institute. Now you had a lot of Armenians and a lot of Greeks and even some Turks, because the school was located just across the police station, Karakol, but there was a back door. So the Turkish students used to sneak in the back door to go to IC, and Alexander turned a blind eye. He never saw anything, he said. So by 1903, the school was giving college-level courses, and it had an international student body. So Alexander decided to change the name. So he called it International College, IC, and it was chartered by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And this would mark the final name change. Now, IC was attracting students from all over Turkey and all the way to Greece. It grew so quickly and so fast that Alexander was really desperate to find a larger building, or better yet, he wanted his own school. He already had a vision of what he wanted, but where could he possibly find the funds to build such a school? Well, in 1901, John S. Kennedy passed away, bequeathing IC $20,000. More than that, Emma Kennedy invited Alexander all the way to New York to stay with her. And while there, he met Helen Gold, and she's the daughter of a railroad tycoon and a very well-known philanthropist. She gave him $5,000. Emma gave him $50,000. So now with $75,000, Alexander could finally build the school of his dreams, and he already knew where exactly. He located the place. It's called Paradise. That's about 2.5 kilometers away from Smyrna. Now, not only did he bring back money, he also brought back an assistant and also pastor. His name was Cass Arthur Reed, and he would end up marrying the daughter of Alexander McLachlan, and that's her, Rosalind. And he would end up being the president of IC. Now, Alexander designed the campus himself with 3 main building structures. That construction began in 1912. The campus was finished in 15 months, just in time for the fall term. The buildings were earthquake-proof, and they were, let's see, McLachlan Hall, Carnarvon Lodge. This was named after Kennedy, Carnarvon, the Kennedys. There was a gymnasium, but what's interesting about the gymnasium is that Dr. James Naismith, he is the inventor of basketball. He's the one who helped him design the gymnasium. So actually, IC was the first in the region to bring the game of basketball. And there was an auditorium, and there were many outdoor, of course, houses, laundry buildings, stables, golf courts, tennis court, running track, athletic field. It was really an amazing, amazing campus. Now, this is the inauguration day. Now, everybody looks here very happy, but actually, it was a lot of trouble just a few days earlier. The Greek students decided to put up the Greek flag everywhere for the inauguration. And of course, this made the Turkish students very angry. So a huge fight broke out between the two. I mean, a real fight. It was a fist fight. The police had to be called in. The students were expelled. And Alexander was panicking if he can get everything, in time for the inauguration. Well, nothing happened on the inauguration day, so it worked out really, really well. But the problem between the Turks and the Greeks, that's just an inkling of what's about to happen. So it is first year, the Paradise Campus IC, 411 students registered. That was a record number. But 6 weeks later, the tensions between the Turks and the Greek students rose again. This time, in one incident, the Greeks marched off the campus in anger. Only 20 returned. 100 never came back. And this is really important because before, the Greeks were the majority and the rules were really made for them by them. But they lost their influence because now the Turkish minority now became the majority and they had their own demands. So they did not want to go to morning chapel services anymore, and they insisted on Friday prayers instead. And remember, this is a Christian school, a Protestant school, so it was difficult. Well, in 1914, the same year of the inauguration, World War I begins, and Turkey sided with Germany. So French, British, US residents in Smyrna suddenly became the enemies. The US embassy told Alexander to leave Turkey, but Alexander refused, and instead he volunteered himself. He said, I will become a prisoner of war. But, he had such a good relationship with the Turks that they didn't imprison him or anything. They allowed him just to stay on being the president of IC. But the student and teacher population decreased a lot, but they had to keep the school going. If they didn't, then the Turkish military would take over, like they did everything else. So they kept it open, though very few students, very few teachers. Still, with few students, then not enough money was coming in to keep it open. But then $2,000 donation from Emma Kennedy suddenly arrived, and IC continued. This donation will be the first of many to come from Emma Kennedy, which kept the school afloat for the rest of its years. Now, at the college, you had only 3 teachers left teaching everything. Alexander himself, Cass Arthur Reed, the assistant he brought from New York, and a professor called Professor Samuel Caldwell. It was up to these 3 to keep the classes going. Well, World War I raged on, and things everywhere were becoming difficult. Of course, there were diseases, famine, and like everywhere else. Now, then one day, Alexander heard that the POWs, British and Indians, they were being brought over to Smyrna, and the jails there were horrible. So he went to the authorities and said, what do you think about me turning IC into a big jail, and we take in all these prisoners? The Turkish authorities said, okay. So the prisoners, over 2,000 prisoners, I think, arrived, and they all stayed at IC, and they got beautiful welcome, a lot of food, lots of clothes, and these soldiers, they were so tired and they were so grateful for everything. Some were limping. One man collapsed. The IC staff member pulled him on his back, carried him inside, and I found something that one of the prisoners later wrote. He said, everything that man or woman could do, they did. We had not known the like for many, many years. So the entire IC campus was made available to the prisoners, dormitories, rooms, basketball courts, everything. 19 prisoners, though, died. They couldn't save them, and they still are buried right now at IC in Smyrna, Izmir. But why, how could Alexander do this? Why would the Turks allow him? I'm going to point to this man right here, Rahmi Bey. He was actually a secret sympathizer to Christians. He wanted to protect them. And he allowed them to keep on running their businesses and their schools. And actually, for a while, Smyrna was a safe haven for Armenians because Rahmi Bey would not allow anyone to touch Smyrna. All right, well, the war was over and people of Smyrna thought, okay, it's all over, but then the Greeks invade. So they occupy Smyrna on May 15, 1919. And the battles between the Turks and the Greeks broke out almost immediately. And this battles, actually this occupation, it fueled the Turkish nationalism. Now, and I see the Greek occupation really changed the student distribution. So now you had students from Asia Minor and no longer able to reach the school, meaning the Turks, while the Greek and Armenian students all the way from Greece and Aegean islands could. So now the Turkish students decreased, the Greek students increased, so the curriculum had to be readapted all over again. But the Turks, of course, were not going to stay there not doing anything, so they retaliated and they attacked the Greek troops and defeated them. On September 10, 1922, the Turkish army entered Smyrna. By mid-afternoon, the Turkish army controlled all of Smyrna. And you see here, I found a great picture of Turkish troops actually passing through the IC campus. Now, also running around were Turks called Chetis. Can't see them very well, but they're basically troublemakers. And they robbed houses and they just attacked people. And they were caught by Alexander McLachlan attacking one of the houses, this one, settlement house is called. And so they attacked him and beat him. And they were just about to shoot them when a Turkish officer arrived and stopped them. So Alexander was taken back to school. He was very, very badly wounded. And as he was recovering in bed, he suddenly saw thick smoke. Now, the Paradise campus was above the actual city. So they can actually see a fire. In Smyrna, thousands of people running towards the harbor as flames spread rapidly, burning the city. Cass was able to put his family on a US ship, and Alexander was carried onto another ship, the British ship, and taken to Malta. Now, what was really odd and heartbreaking that if you look at these pictures here, so you've got all these people, thousands dying and burning, and these are the Allied ships. And it took them, they watched for a few hours, and then they came, but after many, many people died. So that's the sad part right there. All right, well, afterwards, so everybody went to Greece, and Cass came back with IC teachers, Caleb Lawrence and Samuel Caldwell. They returned to Smyrna to help with the relief efforts. By the time Alexander McLachlan came back, a new country was in place, so it was the new Republic of Turkey, and headed by Ataturk. Everything had changed, even the alphabet. It wasn't easy, but IC conformed to all the rules and a completely Turkish student body. No more Greeks, no more Armenians. So they had to change again the entire curriculum. And life at school continued, but I wrote a few, everything changed and some of the rules. no religion. Now this is a Protestant school, a Christian school, so no more religion. Students are forbidden to attend any services. Textbooks were censored. No Bible classes, chapel services. Instead, there would be an imam provided. And this, I tell you this because this is what's going to eventually cause a lot of problems later on. In 1926, Alexander retired. He and Rosalind moved to Kingston, Ontario, and Cass Arthur Reed became the president of IC. And this is, as I told you, Rosalind, Alexander's daughter, and their 3 children. Now, things had changed really drastically since the creation of the new Turkish Republic. There was a growing sense of nationalism at the school and indeed the entire country. The faculty was always angry at Cass and the foreign teachers, telling them that they don't trust them and they don't even want them at the school. So this is what they demanded. They demanded no foreigners can run social, cultural, or extracurricular school activities. Foreigners cannot discipline Turkish students, and I have to say that Turkish students were acting up on purpose, and they could not do anything. No one can speak English other than the English class. So it was very, very difficult. But worst of all, that the students themselves began inciting the press, the newspapers against IC. Every minor incident, they would call into the newspapers, and the newspapers would portray them as anti-Turkish everywhere. So even though all foreign schools were targeted, IC, for some reason, IC was attacked the most. No matter what IC did or said, it was anti-Turkish, and they were ridiculed. The newspapers also attacked and criticized the wealthy Turkish families who were sending their kids to IC, accusing them of being disloyal to the government. So the students and the teachers became so hostile that it was just impossible to even keep the classes open. One thing had become very, very clear. IC was no longer wanted in Turkey. So the question was, do we stay open or do we shut down? In 1934, IC graduated its last class and put up a beautiful campus for sale. And I found this here in one of the newspaper. I translated it. This is what they said when the decision came out to shut down. The scorpion's nest in Izmir, the American college, is closed. This appeared in the Berlik newspaper in 1934. Meanwhile, back to Beirut. AUB's prep school was not doing well at all. Students were dwindling, and without students, there would be no AUB. So, Bayard Dodge, he's an old friend of Cass Arthur Reed. He was closely monitoring the events in Smyrna. He is the president of AUB. So he thought that IC was such a good reputation. It was an amazing, actually, reputation. The students of IC did not even have to sit for exams to go to universities. They just accepted them immediately. So it was such a good reputation and experience. And they asked, so Bayard asked Cass, why don't you come to Beirut and bring a few of your teachers and reorganize our school here. Let us merge together. So Cass accepted the offer. IC Smyrna was left behind, and he and 3 teachers moved to Beirut and reorganized the curriculum and I guess introduced a few more classes. After 1 year, Cass moved to California, leaving IC in good hands. In the fall of 1936, IC opened in Beirut and welcomed 901 boys. Just a year later, Bayard Dodge had to actually turn away more applicants. There were so many. So students arrived from Iraq, Sudan, Egypt, Iran, Transjordan, Cyprus, and the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Zanzibar, Syria, Singapore, Bombay, Ethiopia, and even the Greek Orthodox communities sent their students. The Armenian students, whose families have been evacuated from Turkey, also enrolled. Palestinian students made the long drive to Beirut and registered. But now, a new problem, tensions between Palestinian and Jewish students were beginning to rise. Now, 3 years after World War II ended in 1948, the State of Israel was created. Thousands of Palestinians fled to Lebanon. And this would mark the rise of Arab nationalism and the rise of Lebanese-Palestinian tension. Both of these are going to greatly affect IC here. Strong emotions were running high on campus regarding the Palestinian problem and outside campus, of course, and there were demonstrations all the time, and students would just walk out of class and join the many protests in the streets outside IC. Finally, in 1955, the IC board voted to move IC to a new and separate campus. There are two reasons for that. First, they wanted to get the younger IC students away from the older AUB students. But the main reason was that AUB wanted its campus back. So in 1956, IC and AUB were officially separated by a Lebanese presidential decree. Now that the separation was official, IC had to vacate the premises and find a new site. And they did. It was a beautiful piece of land in an area called Mishref. This is about 25 kilometers south of Beirut. In 1963, construction began. It was really lovely, lovely campus. The architect was Edwin Durrell, who was famous. He's the one who also was the architect behind the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. Anyway, in 1971, it opened its doors and IC was able to move a large part of students to the Mishref campus. The idea that the rest would follow and AUB would get its campus back. So this is the campus, really, really beautiful. Then in 1975, the civil war, the Lebanese civil war broke out. Militias shelled and they just took over the entire campus. So the Mishref campus had to be abandoned. The students had to be brought back to Beirut campus. In 1978, IC made another attempt to leave because AUB still wanted their campus back. So in 78, we all thought that the war was over. There was a ceasefire. So IC found a British school that was abandoned, took it over, renovated it. This is it. And they built this dome here. This is a swimming pool underneath. It was really an Olympic-sized swimming pool, very, very nice. And on the day of the inauguration of the swimming pool, 1982, Israel invades Lebanon and Israeli jets, they just fire at this dome and the whole school was demolished. I went to the elementary school of IC, I was here. So this is, I remember the pool, I remember the campus, but anyway, Israel destroyed it. So students were brought back once again to the Beirut campus. Now, by 1985, the campus in Beirut had become really overcrowded. Fortunately, the British embassy, this is the British embassy, in 1985, there were a lot of kidnapping of foreigners back then. So they vacated this building, and IC, which is located right here behind those trees, they bought it and they made it into an elementary school. So the elementary school students were moved there. At least there was a little bit of breathing space. At the same time, the war was continuing really bad, and crossing from the east to West Beirut, where IC is located in West Beirut, was very, very dangerous. There were snipers and bombs going off, and it was so dangerous for the kids to go and come. So IC decided to build like a satellite campus in the hills. We call it Ain Ar. It's right here, and this solved the problem of the east, the students living in the east side of Beirut. We still have it now. The Ain Ar campus, it still exists. In 1991, the war ended as quickly as it had started, and the reconstruction efforts began. This is Beirut at the end of the war, 1991, and this is how it looks today. Now, we still had the problem. AUB still wanted its campus back, and the relationship between the two had become really, really strange. But IC had nowhere to go. The problem had not been solved. So finally, in 2009, after a lot of negotiations and a lot of arguments, AUB agreed to sell the campus to IC. This was in 2009. So finally, IC had its home. And this is it. This is IC right now. This is where I am, right here. This is the school, football field, all the way back. So since we bought the school in 2009, then we could build on our own land. So this is the elementary school right here. We've got the middle school, preschool, and obviously now it's a co-ed school and it's no longer a Christian school. And we've got between here and our Ain Ar campus, we've got 3,600 students attending IC. It's no longer a boarding school. It's just a day school. But we also boast baccalaureate, IB, all these wonderful academic classes. So in 2012, 12 students and 3 administrators, among them myself, we went back to Smyrna, which is now called Izmir. Why did we go? Well, we were invited by the American Collegiate Institute. I was sitting in my office and suddenly one day we get a letter saying, we are ACI, we used to be your sister school, and you don't know us, but we did know you. We would like you to come back, and so we can meet you. So I had never heard, of course, I was still new and never heard of ACI, but other schools were also invited, and these are the schools founded by the American Board. So they also invited Uskudar, American Academy, Tarsus, American College, the American College of Greece, and the American College of Sofia. Of the board schools, only IC had left Turkey. So actually they really wanted it. They were very curious to meet us, and we were very curious to meet them. And here we are, our students. The IC students became the center of attention. They went up on stage, and look, this is the same stage. So we were the first IC students back on the stage, and there were so many people came to see them. And among them was this woman, and she's at the time 96. Her name is Aishi Maida. She was so happy to see us, and she told us how she was a student at ACI, and she told us how there would be dances between the boys of IC and the girls of ACI, and how much fun they had together. And she told us a lot of things about IC. And then a lot of people, actually, when the kids went up there, they started to cry when they saw our kids back. It was very touching, very, very touching. And she, Aisha, came up to me and asked, are you coming back? Does that mean you're coming back? We want you to come back. But I had to tell her that, no, we're not coming back. IC has found its home in Beirut. So this is it. And that's, in short, the story of IC, because there's a lot of characters and a lot of little anecdotes in here. But in short, this is the story of IC.
Reem, thank you very much. Fascinating story and wonderful pictures that you've managed to assemble. What I suggest is if you stop sharing, and then we'll take questions so I can see everybody.
Stop sharing, yeah.
Anyway, thank you again, really interesting. Now we can take questions and comments. You can turn your video on and wave. You can use the Zoom hand raise function. You can use chat and catch my attention. But why don't I start off? So a lot of campuses over the years, it strikes me, and the one or two, I was just wondering what happened to them. What happened to the Mishraf campus? I mean, it was
Mishraf, It was sold for a very low price during the war. It was sold very low. This is why they were able to buy the other campuses, though. But today, actually, it is the Hariri University. So it's been turned into a university. And when I went there, it was renovated after all the militias and they just did such a bad job of it. It was renovated and they kept it exactly as it is. Even the names of the building and everything's exactly as it is, but it's a university now.
And what about the buildings on the old Paradise campus?
Oh, the Paradise campus is now a NATO base, and they also kept it. I went there with the students. They kept everything. In fact, when you walk in McLaughlin Hall, there's even the history of IC. And there are these NATO, I mean, the NATO men were just mesmerized to see us because they didn't, they had this really amazing school. And so, no, it was great. No, they left it as is. It's beautiful. But it was sold. It was also sold for very little as well. We seem to do that. We sell things for very little money. And the other campus, the Shamoun campus, that was a British school. Yeah. That was completely demolished. The Israelis demolished it completely. And now that was sold. And now it's a development complex. What else? The British embassy, that we left that was sold to AUB as part of the negotiations. So we left that and we've built our own elementary school, which I showed you.
So what I didn't quite understand, so the current school is on part of the AUB campus or on their old land, or how
it is? It's on the same campus. It's just one long campus all the way down to the sea. So the campus that I am right now here, this was part of AUB. It was supposed to be, they built it for themselves. But then when they started the prep school and IC came and they merged, they remained on this campus. So actually between us, I can walk just 2 minutes when I'm at AUB. It's the same, and the same trees that line. So you go all the way down.
Oh, well,
but there's a gate now in the middle. We have a gate. We have a gate.
So you control, yes, your own territory.
Of course.
Does anyone else have questions or comments or? No, well, let me just continue. Sorry, I see Gillian. Do you want to turn your mic on?
First question, how are relations between AUB and IC now? And why was there so much friction between them when they split apart?
Well, right now the relationship is great, no more problems at all. The friction is that they wanted their campus back. They wanted to have their own, they wanted to make it into their own dormitories or expand their own programs. And we had become IC. We were no longer the prep school and we were no longer really feeding. We were meant to be a feeder school, but by then there were many other schools and they were coming from all over. So we were not the main feeder school anymore. So there was really no point in just having a prep school. I mean, it was useless for them at that point. So they said leave. And we said, okay, by 1980, we will leave. But then 1975, the Civil War started and it was impossible. I mean, we had militias in here in this campus all the time. This campus got hit badly in 85. There were so many problems. It wasn't even safe to be here. Technically, IC should have closed, but the teachers and everybody, they kept coming. The students kept coming. I was here. This was my school and I lived through the Civil War. So, yeah, and we used to hide in the hallways all the time. I remember hiding and then the shelling. And so where were we to go? We had no, and that's what the IC kept telling you, where do we go? We tried twice. So dangerous because the Mishraf campus was taken over by militias and the Shamoun campus was bombed by the Israelis. Where do we go? That's why there was friction. Yeah.
It's a fascinating story. Thank you.
Yes, Shebnem.
I was wondering if this is the same school in Buja or the Buja school is different, the American Missionary School. Wasn't there a Buja?
No, the only IC International College is here. It used to be in Smyrna, Izmir today,
yes,
but
Buja,
that's it.
Smyrna in Buja in Smyrna.
Yes.
so there was an American missionary school in Buja, but I was wondering if this is the same one or if there were more than one.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. There are many American missionary schools.
Okay,
Is this?
okay, it's not the same one. All right.
It could be though. It
No,
could be. We had many name
because
changes.
the reason I'm asking that, because my grandfather, who was the son of Izmir's Mufti and was born in 1900, attended the American missionary school, and at the age of 80 he was still able to recite Bible in English. So I'm just trying to get to his records in school if I can, but I don't know which. It was in Buja, what the school he attended. It was an American missionary school, but I don't know if this.
That's the old campus. That's if he said American school, if it's a boarding school for boys, then yes. If in Buja, that's the old campus. If so, you give your grandfather's,
are there student records? I mean, when you register the school, there must be some rosters somewhere, right?
You know, if you give me your grandfather, we don't. Okay, so
I'll tell you my grandfather's name, whose name is Adnan. And I think at the time he would be known Saracoğlu, because they didn't have the second names, obviously, because it's probably before 1936, 34. So, so Adnan Saracoğlu. So it should be something between 1900 to 1910, those years, 1914, something like that, or maybe a little further, maybe even. But so he was the Saracoğlu, and his first name is Adnan, Adnan.
And what's his? How do you spell his last name?
Sarac.
If you want, I can send you. I can look it up.
Oh, that was nice. It's so nice of you. No, because it's very interesting, because he is, after all, the son of Mufti in Izmir. So it's a very interesting kind of thing for him that he was able to still recite Bible at the age of 80. So it was very funny. Yeah.
So what we can do is we can connect you to Reem. If you just email me, and I'll pass on the details to Reem.
That would be so nice. All right. Wonderful.
Sure, I looked him up
so much.
We have in the boxes that I found some cards as well of students from Smyrna. So I've since that boxes, I have donated almost all the information to AUB Archives, because they have a climate controlled library, and I wanted to be there available for anybody. But I can look it up if you'd like.
Yeah, because he used to tell this story that he would go to the school in Buja. He would go to school and he would leave his fez to the grocery shop. They would leave their fezzes to grocery shop, so then they would go to the school, and then they would take their fezzes back, and etc. So that's one of the stories.
Oh
wow. Other questions and comments?
Thank you.
So Reem, what's the mix of students now? What's the catchment area? Is it truly international, or is it really Lebanese now?
You know, it is Lebanese. It's most Lebanese, but most of the Lebanese now, since the war, they all have nationality. So we've got Lebanese American, Lebanese British, Lebanese French, Lebanese African. We've got a lot of those. So they are not international in the way you think, but they are through their passports. Because the Civil War, everybody left. And when they came back, they got new nationalities. So in that way, yes, we have a lot of, so it's international in that way. But we have an international curriculum, so it's not strictly Lebanese, IB and all these things.
And so what have you, I can't remember when your book was published, but have you had much response from IC alumni?
I have, yes, the alumni love it. Yes, people especially, well, obviously the Turkish part is all new to everybody. I mean, nobody knew about these boxes. Nobody knew about the diary. All anybody knew was that the founder was Alexander McQueen, and we came from Turkey. In fact, when I started working here 16 years ago, that's all I knew as well, until my interview with the history teacher. he told me about the boxes, my traveling to Connecticut, meeting Howard Reed, who is the son of past Arthur Reed. I didn't know that either. So it was a revelation. It was new for them. Like, so that was very interesting for the alumni. But what really got their attention, the alumni, is the Beirut part. Because then the Civil War, I describe in details the history of the Civil War and what happened, and how IC survived, how the militias came in, and what their teachers, their professors, their directors, how they sacrificed. They put themselves in danger to protect the students all the time, to protect the campus. So it got a lot of attention, that part. Definitely.
Have some of the alumni sent in additional material? So I'm wondering, is it a continuing research project, and are there sort of, let's say, gaps in the record that you are seeking more information on?
My book spans over 100 years. It ends the day the Civil War ends, and I felt this is the story ending because it found its home. It's been looking for a home. It's been looking and looking for a home. And I always thought of it more of a love story between teachers along the years, directors along the years, looking for a home for this school called IC. Continuing after the war, it just became really a regular school after the war, and just renovating and fixing it. Maybe one day. And then you've got Corona, we lived through the Corona. And now it's actually maybe, because now it's living through a crisis. You know, a crisis started, 2-3 years ago in Lebanon, economic crisis. And we also were wondering if we should close down, because we lost, everybody lost their money. People who could leave the country, they left. We lost a lot of our students, and even the students that remained, they had no more money to pay the tuition. So we had to call all our alumni, our board of directors, help, or else we have to close. And they did help. And here we are, still opening. And then now things are a little bit better because, I don't know, we're adapting, or really and I guess people are sending in some dollars to the country. So the people who have left are sending dollars to the children and things like that. So it's getting a little better, and the school is definitely staying.
And do you have an affiliate organization in the States that sort of helps with that, or do you do it directly? I mean, is the American Mission Board of Control still in existence, or do you?
No. That left when we moved here.
Distant, isn't it? That history.
No. Yeah, when we moved here, we left there's no more missionaries, and it's no longer a Christian school either. Although at the beginning there were, I wouldn't say missionaries, but mission-like people from AUB at the time still running the school. So there was, the Christians can go and pray at the president's house and things like that. But no, that disappeared over the years. That disappeared, I think, in 1950s, when an American has to be the president of IC. It has to be an American president. So when the Americans started coming, they were not missionary. They were just normal. They were just not missionaries type. So it's a non-Christian school now. It's just for everybody.
And when the separation from AUB happened, and presumably the Constitution or whatever it was formed, saying you have to have an American president, did the Lebanese side say, well, actually, you need to have such and such a post that is Lebanese? I'm just thinking about the Lebanese constitution and the division of powers between groups.
No. They came from Smyrna with this understanding that the president had to be American, and AUB has the same thing. The president has to be American. So we always must have it as part of the Constitution. The president has to be American. So that's going to stay, and that's always been the case, because we are chartered by we have a Massachusetts charter. So we're considered kind of an American school, but not really. We're kind of American, international, Lebanese, everything. French. It's also. We have French school. We have the French system as well. So we've got the French system and the English system and an American system, all in one school.
And just to be clear, the teaching is all done in English, or do you
No.
use 3 languages?
Our kids speak 3 languages. So we have a French section. So when the parents enter, they want to go to nursery, you have to choose between the French track or the English track. If you go to the French track, everything is in French except English lessons and Arabic lessons. If you go to the English, everything's in English except for the French and the Arabic. So by the end they graduate, they are speaking, they have to speak 3 languages. So that's why French, because we used to be a French mandate.
Yeah.
So the prep school was teaching French because as a French mandate. So when IC came with the English, it merged together.
Okay, excellent. I know I've hogged the questions. Anyone else got something to ask or comment? Yes, Gillian. You're on mute.
Has there been any comparison done between all the American board schools that popped up in the Near East and what their systems are like? I mean, I know about Boazaji and Robert College, that situation. I'm sort of wondering if there's similarities or differences.
Not official comparison, but after that time when I went to IC, we received that letter. So we kept up the correspondence. So now we meet, we call ourselves Founders Day, these schools that I mentioned. So we meet, before Corona, we were meeting every year, and I would take some of the kids from IC and they would take some of the kids from each school, and we would meet in a country. So we met in Istanbul, in Izmir, in Bulgaria, in the schools of the board. So when we are there together, we talk and we compare unofficially, like, oh, you do this, oh, you do that. It's actually very nice because at one point, apparently, we were all sisters and cousin schools is what we called each other. We were visiting each other. So it's really odd that, 78 years had passed and we didn't know each other, and suddenly we're there all together again. And yes, we compare. So, which is really great that before Corona, we even had some interscholastic things happening. So we sent our kids to Izmir, they sent their kids here so they can compete. And that's really nice because this was a repeating of history. And all this time, we did not know of each other's existence, which is something considering that we were once very, very close. But yeah, we compare. And we're very similar. Yes, we are similar, except we have the French. We have a very, very strong French program, being a French mandate. But everything else, the way, the character development, the way we think is very similar. Yes.
Is the curriculum mostly American, or you said there was a mix of British and French? So
yes, it's not we have an American program. We don't call it American program. We call it college preparatory program, but it's based a lot on American high school program, though not exactly. But we've got the Lebanese baccalaureate in French and English. We've got the international baccalaureate that is in English, and four tracks. So IB, Lebanese, baccalaureate, French, English, and CPP. Wow. So it's really international and not purely American, no. Though we consider ourselves American school, but not really.
You mentioned that the boxes, if you like, are now with AUB in the library there. Do you know, have they been digitized? Are they available to the public? Because I know your book will have sort of carefully selected the best and for the sake of a good, clear story. But
right.
If you did want to look at original material, are they available electronically? Not
electronically yet. No, you have to go physically because some of the papers were so fragile. I didn't even dare open them, and a lot of things were lost because I don't know where they were placed during the Civil War, but there was a lot of water leakage on them, obviously. So I don't know how they're gonna. We scanned here as much as we can. I guess they're scanning there as much as they can, but I'm not sure yet it's available. There's a lot of information, a lot. And there are more boxes. I don't know where they are, but the history teacher told me 20 or 25. I found 3 in the garbage truck. I didn't say this, but I found another 2. There's a cave somewhere in here. I found those there. I found the original flag of IC, which is really, really cool. And there are more boxes. I just don't know where they are. I think they must have burned. I mean, we were hit here, so I don't know where they could be.
Well, perhaps we can put out a note in our newsletter and say, well, has anybody got any records from IC? Because it would be good if some of this, if there is additional material out there, that it comes back to IC, and maybe AUB Library can help preserve it. And in fact, I'm intrigued, in our audience, are there any IC alumni or any whose parents might have been IC alumni? Any here? No? Anyway, it's the sort of thing that we can sort of put a note in our next newsletter, and hopefully we can, reach a few alumni, and the search for additional material,
Well, if you want to put a note on the website, Quentin, I am looking for this. I don't know if you can see it. This cup. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This cup is missing. This is a cup. It's a silver cup. This was given to IC by the POWs in 1918 when they left. They sent it, sterling silver. They sent it to Alexander McLaughlin, and this is a thank you for taking in all these prisoners of war and being so good to them. They sent us a big thank you. This was available, and then somewhere in the move it has disappeared. Now, while my history teacher that I interviewed asked me to look for the boxes, Howard Reed, the guy I went to Connecticut, he made me promise to look for this cup. And I can't find it anywhere. I've looked, I even went to Izmir and asked people to look there. We can't find it. So if you're gonna put anything, it would be great if anybody has seen the silver cup, we would like it back, please.
Right.
If it hasn't been melted.
Send us a photograph, and we'll build a little appeal around that photo, and we'll see what we can produce. So Reem, last question from me, and I'm just sort of wondering, so what are you working on next?
What am I working on next? You mean a book about IC? I'm working on some private books. Now, IC at the moment, we're just concentrating on getting back on our feet. As I said, we're going through a crisis. So at the moment, we're concentrating more on that. Not a time for books right now. So I do my own private books I'm writing, but not IC is we're going through kind of a difficult time at the moment, but we've survived so much, so many things. I mean, there's so much stuff I didn't tell you in the book, that it's such a resilient school. We're going to survive this as well and do even better than before.
Excellent. And where can we buy your book? Where is it available?
It is, I put the link at the last page. I can give it to you now. It's available at Antoine Library, but I'll send you the link. It's on the last,
okay.
I don't really know how to go back to that, but it's on the last page of the,
Yeah, well, if you can put it in chat, but also what we will do is put it in our note for people. So Antoine Libraries at a Lebanese publisher, Beirut publisher?
It is, and they do, wait, can I see if I can screenshot? Let me see if I can do this. I'm not sure, just a second. Here, this is it.
Okay. AntoineOnline.com.
Right, they deliver internationally, so if anyone's interested, it's a good story. And the proceeds all go to the scholarship funds. I mean, the whole book was written so we can actually sell it to alumni, and the money goes, all of it, to keep our students at IC so they don't leave because of financial reasons. So all the proceeds from this also go straight to our scholarship fund.
Excellent.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you very much again for a wonderful story of many ups and downs. And, you know, I very much hope that IC overcomes its current challenges, and I look forward to coming and visiting the school in November, if I may.
Oh, yes, come. I'll give you the grand tour. I see AUB. Anybody, you're all please welcome to come. And we love visitors, and we love showing off IC. We love showing off Lebanon. So yes, please come.
Be glad to. Reem, thank you very much indeed. Thank you everybody for coming, and wish you all a good evening, good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.